last name alphabetically. Michelle Sicolo. Matt Cohen. Joe Lahib. Marianne Stewart. And William Sweeney. This event is hosted by the Chinese Americans of Lexington, also known as CALex. I would like to introduce Hou Zexu, the Vice President of CALex, to say a few words.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Michelle, Matthew, Joseph, Marianne, and William for coming to meet the community. And thank you all for taking the time to join the meeting. My name is Hou Zexu, Vice President of CALex. CALex is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. It was formed in October 2017 by a team of volunteers in Lexington. Our mission is to promote participation in public services, educational, cultural, and other local community affairs, to represent Chinese American interests and to promote civic engagement. The organization has made some accomplishments since the establishment. One is to join the coalition of Chinese American communities across statewide citizen towns in opposition of H 3361, a state bill to single out Asian Americans for collection, reporting, and verification of desegregated data. The second is to host a party to celebrate 2018 Chinese New Year and Lantern Festival to celebrate with close to 300 participants. The third is to hold seminars such as Lexington 2017 debt exclusion and school volunteering. We also fully prepared for 2018 Patriots Day parade, which was cancelled due to weather. And most recently, in order to make it easier for parents to find out kid activities, especially for families who are new in Lexington and parents whose kids just start school, we collected and compiled a list of over 30 service providers for after-school classes and extracurricular programs, which include academic study, art, music, and various sport activities. As a new organization, we have many areas you can contribute. You are welcome to join CALex and make your impact to the organization and the community. Your time, effort, and expertise will make CALex a better organization and Lexington a better place to live. We also offer community service opportunities for high school students. Please feel free to contact us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. So for the format today, we will start with each candidate giving a self-introduction and opening statement, and each of you would have 3 minutes for that. And I will then ask the candidates a series of questions that we have collected from everybody here. And those questions have been shared with the candidates ahead of time. And for those questions, each candidate would have 2 minutes for each question. And after the questions, each candidate would have 2 minutes to have a closing statement. Ms. Wei Hu is our awesome timekeeper. So when you have 30 seconds left, Ms. Wei Hu is going to hold out this yellow sign for 30 seconds warning. And then when your time is up, and she will have a red sign for that purpose. Our session ends at 11:30, after which we will take a group picture together. And during this debate, or it's not exactly a debate, and we ask the candidates to be respectful to each other, and we also ask the audience to be respectful to the candidates when they speak. So I don't think for this awesome group it's gonna be a problem. And for the order of speaking, we will go from left to right, and then right to left. And okay, so that's that. And so let's start with the self-introduction and the opening statement.
Thank you to CALex for organizing this forum, and to all of you for being here this morning. I'm an incredibly fortunate person. My family has lived the American dream. My parents grew up poor. My mom was the youngest of 6 children born to Italian immigrants. My dad was the oldest of 6, struggling to make it in Cambridge. My mom and dad are my heroes. My dad was the first in his family to go to college, and he became a successful businessman. My mom was a homemaker who created a wonderful environment for my sisters and me. I grew up in Lexington with the privilege of going to what was even then one of the best public school systems in Massachusetts. After getting my undergraduate degree at Villanova, I came home, interned in then Senator John Kerry's office, and was soon hired as his scheduler in his Boston U.S. Senate office. I also served on town meeting at age 24. This sparked my interest in policy, so I went back to school and got my graduate degree in public affairs. Then I took a job as the assistant town administrator for the town of Hudson. I thought I'd stay 2 years before moving on to something bigger and better. But the work I was doing, helping people and changing lives, kept me there for a full 20 years. Overseeing the budget and capital plan, I was able to help that community prosper, improve its school systems, and revitalize its downtown. My efforts helped take crime off the streets and gave residents opportunities for recreation. I built a senior center where people go for socialization and services, and I built a rail trail, like our Minuteman Trail. I built parks, playgrounds, and bridges. These projects required me to learn how to navigate the many state and federal agencies that provide funding, and they taught me how to work on controversial issues. That listening and collaborating with neighbors, working with diverse stakeholders, I learned how to get things done. My work led me to get involved with the regional agency that oversees planning for the majority of the state. I was elected president of the Metropolitan Area Planning Council for 3 terms, and I continue to serve there as its legislative committee chair. Recognized for my knowledge and expertise, I was asked to be on numerous state and regional boards, so many that I can't list them all, but there's a handout in the back to give you an idea. Locally, my colleagues in Lexington encouraged me to run for the planning board, and I was elected to my first townwide volunteer position in 2011. In 2014, I ran for the Board of Selectmen and was re-elected to my 2nd term last year. It has been my privilege to serve this community for more than 7 years. Every day, I get to focus on constituent services, complex policy issues, and drive results to help propel Lexington forward. I'm proud of the things we have accomplished together. I've lived here in Lexington for 50 years. It's where my husband and I chose to raise our kids. It inspires me every day, and it would be an honor to take what I have learned and what I have experienced to serve my community at a higher level.
Thank you all so much for coming, and thank you to CALex for organizing this as well. I was born in Lexington. I met my wonderful wife nearly 14 years ago, and we'll celebrate our 10-year wedding anniversary in actually just under a week, so looking forward to that. And I can honestly say, that I'm more happily married today than I was the day I got married, so it's a nice thing to be able to say. Together, we have 2 young children who will go to the same schools that I did. An 8-year-old daughter who is at Bowman, just around the corner from here, and a 4-year-old son who's still in preschool. He actually just finished his last day for the year there yesterday, and I got to go to a nice party they threw for all the kids. It's a lot of fun to see them all playing together. But at the same time, I'm concerned about their future and the futures of all of our children. In that regard, if elected, I will focus on improving education across the Commonwealth, making sure the economy works for everyone, assuring access to quality health care, and protecting the environment. I am uniquely qualified to address these issues because I've spent my life working on social issues, and while at the State House, learning how to draft and pass effective policy and legislation. And this dedication you can see in my educational and professional lives. I earned a bachelor's degree from Brandeis University with a dual major in politics and sociology. I earned a master's degree from Harvard with a concentration in government. I actually earned this degree at night while holding down a full-time job at the State House. And I just completed a PhD in political science at Northeastern University, having written a dissertation explaining how nations use cyberspace to advance and defend their interests on the world stage. And I've worked at all levels of government. My first job was at the local level, when I worked in the Lexington Town Manager's office. In this job, I got to see the impact that state laws can have on local communities. I worked as a staffer for the Massachusetts Democratic Party and helped ensure the success of forward-looking candidates for office. At the federal level, I worked in Senator Kennedy's Boston office, assisting the staff on both foreign and domestic policy issues. And at the state level, I have unique experiences, gained from having worked over 7 years at the State House as a research and budget director. I have done all the aspects of this job. I've drafted and passed major legislation. I've evaluated budgets and defended budget priorities. I've done the committee work and the district work and provided constituent services. I know the ins and outs of this job, and I want to put my experience to work for this district. To that end, you can trust that I will always work hard for you and remain in contact with you. In this campaign so far, I have personally been knocking on doors, placing the door hangers, the lawn signs, responding myself to your emails and calls, researching and writing my own position statements and debate answers. I know from my time at the State House that to do this job right requires someone with strong principles, but also someone who wants to hear and learn from others, and who's willing to give everything they have to it. Just as I'm committed to this campaign, if elected, I'll be committed to fighting for you, this district in Massachusetts. Hope to earn your vote. Thank you.
Well, thank you and good morning, everyone. Thank you doubly for being here on one of the nicest Saturday mornings I think I've seen yet this year. It's beautiful outside. I appreciate y'all being here. My name is Joe Lahiff, and I'm running for state representative of the 15th Middlesex District. I have deep roots here in Lexington and have committed most of my adult life to serving our community in one form or fashion. I grew up in Lexington. I attended Lexington Public Schools here and graduated from Lexington High School in 1986. I'm a former police officer. I spent 22 years serving the Lexington Police Department. As a part of my service with the police department, I was a field training officer, a detective, and a school resource officer. While I was assigned as a school resource officer, I worked as part of a team of teachers, guidance counselors, administrators, and support staff on issues such as bullying, school safety, and the opioid crisis. During my time working with our schools, one of our top priorities was breaking down boundaries. I was asked to become the assistant coach of the lacrosse team and was proud to serve as the chairman of the school council. Working with parents, educators, and community members on the school council helped to ensure that our students had every asset we could possibly provide readily accessible to them. I'm currently the Director of Asset Management at NewPath Inc. in Woburn. NewPath is a human services company which supports people living with disabilities in both the residential and day program setting. Our mission at NewPath, quite simply, is to make life's journey happier, healthier, and more fulfilling for people living with disabilities. I'm a former town meeting member, a husband, and a dad to 3 great kids. If elected, my priorities will include addressing issues such as violence in our schools, our crippling opioid crisis, and giving a voice to those who literally can't speak for themselves. I believe that our community is among the very best in the Commonwealth. Ensuring that we continue to be among the very best requires that all of us are free to share our thoughts, that we commit to listening to one another, and that we work collaboratively to better our entire community. I look forward to meeting and listening to you about the issues that affect your lives, and I'm asking for your vote on September 4th. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you also to CALex for this wonderful discussion, this forum today. I want to share my story with you because it really informs why I am in this race. So I'm a granddaughter of Irish, Italian, and Armenian immigrants. I was raised in working and middle-class neighborhoods by parents who were teachers and social justice warriors. From my grandparents and my parents, I learned persistence, the value of hard work, and the importance of service and standing up for shared values. I've been elected 5 times now to town meeting since 2006. I've served in PTAs in leadership levels at the local, state, and national levels. I was elected twice to school committee here in Lexington and served as chair during the worst recession of our lifetime, and did so without cutting programs or laying off staff. We did that by keeping our focus on children. And that experience has taught me the value of an earnest question and a soft heart. For over 20 years, I've dedicated myself to speaking up for children, youth, and families. I'm a prominent voice for public education. Governor Deval Patrick recognized my experience and skills when he made me one of his legacy appointees to the Massachusetts Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, the policy-making authority for all of our Commonwealth schools, educators, and nearly 1 million children. I have not hesitated to speak up for our values and concerns like LGBTQ equality, social emotional learning, charter school authorization. And from that experience on the state board level, I've learned what it takes to both advocate for progressive change and navigate the body to forward that agenda. And that's on the state stage. As member and chair of Massachusetts PTA's federal and state legislative affairs and as past Parent-Teacher Association president of Massachusetts, I've taken the fight for better funding for education, public health, individuals with Disabilities in Education Act and Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program funding, and more to members of our congressional delegation in Washington, D.C. I've encouraged engagement on sharing what I've learned on my blog, blogging on issues at the local, state, and national level since 2009, and much of it on education, and also including extensive sample of letters and public testimony going back to 2006. I volunteered in Jay's office in Boston. I volunteered for Congresswoman Catherine Clark in her district office. And I want to say that my call to service is a call for improving workers' rights, public education equity, and environmental and economic justice. And that's why I've been endorsed by 2 leading statewide progressive groups. I look forward to answering questions today. Thank you.
Hi folks, let me just say thank you to CALex for putting this event together. These conversations that we're going to have are very important. They don't just happen spontaneously. It takes folks creating these kinds of spaces, so thank you for attending and thank you for giving us a space to get together. Folks, my name is Bill Sweeney, and I first learned about the importance of civic life around the kitchen table with my family, both at my parents' home and at my grandparents' home in Lowell and Tewksbury. My mom was a teacher and a union representative. Dad was a surgeon, and my grandfather was a teamster. And what all my relatives have in common was the high value that we all placed on civic life and participation in the political process, and we treated them as bedrock values. It's how my family of Irish immigrants took care of each other, and it's how we all gave back. This means not just voting, but actively supporting good candidates with the values that align with ours. We supported candidates who are committed to the core values of community, good public education, the environment, and helping those that are less fortunate, and just doing what is best for the common good for all people. With that family background, I attended the University of Massachusetts. My major was social thought and political economy, and at the university, I was encouraged to engage in the critical examination of our society and to develop my own ability and capacity to write, reason, and think. Now, I selected that major because I wanted the freedom to cross disciplinary lines. I wanted to be able to look at the questions that we were facing every day that I felt were being ignored or neglected by some of the traditional academic thought. And so right out of college, I went to work in the public sector. I worked on Capitol Hill and spent many years as a legislative aide. And then I came back to Massachusetts and I worked on Beacon Hill. During this time, I wrote legislation and I served the constituency. We even got some good bills passed, like the original brownfields legislation, which let us clean up industrial sites that were polluted and uneconomic and get them productive and economic again for their communities. During that time, I married a woman from Lexington, which is how I came here and how I came to be a resident. But I had to leave the public sector and I went into the private sector. So for the last 22 years. I've worked for companies of various sizes, from startups to companies that approach $1 billion in value. And for 10 of those years, I've been a chief technology officer and chief security officer for several private equity-backed healthcare services and technology companies. Now, in the private sector, I've dealt with many of the real-world issues that we talked about while I was in government. I had to make difficult choices, like what to cut and still deliver on the mission of the business. I've created jobs in growing and shrinking economies, and I know one thing for sure, that education debt today is crushing our young people. I've also worked in heavily regulated markets, and I know public policy impact, good and bad, on business. I'm a dad. I have 2 daughters, and I'll just say that I have a unique background. I bring together progressive social policy and business, and I think that experience makes me uniquely qualified to be your state rep. Thank you.
Thank you for wonderful introductions and opening statements. So now we're entering questions. Our first question is, why are you running for this position?
Okay, I know I only have 2 minutes, so I'm just going to talk about one of the reasons that I'm running for state representative. And that's because 30 years ago, I was able to work summers, nights, and weekends and pay my way through the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. My daughter Abigail is going to attend college next year, and so we went and looked into UMass, and I was astonished that in-state tuition was approaching $30,000. And I don't even believe that includes the books. Now, when I started UMass, tuition was about $2,200. And even if you took meals and room and board, that was still under or around $5,000. You could live off campus, you could go to school, and you could do it. But nobody can do that today. Nobody's going to earn $120,000 in 4 years as a full-time student. So an opportunity that I had just 30 years ago simply doesn't exist today. You know, we tell our people, work hard, get an education, and you'll get a good job. But what does that really mean? Well, for many people, and far too many people, that means you're just going to have to go into massive debt. Debt markets will mortgage your home, they'll mortgage your car, and now they're asking our best and brightest to mortgage their future. I see it in the young people every day. I hire bright, talented young people that have had to mortgage their future, and now they're living paycheck to paycheck because of it. And all it really does, in my opinion, is serve to concentrate more wealth right at the very top. I see it as a form of indenture. I know it has to stop, and I know we need to change it. So I'm running for state representative, among a lot of other reasons, because the time has come for us to deliver on the promise of debt-free, public, higher education for our people. And just to be clear, this isn't science fiction, this isn't something ultra-liberal, and it's not something that's undoable. My own father wouldn't be a surgeon without the help of the government. He received low-interest loans, he received direct scholarships, and they weren't through profiteering in debt markets like they are today. Thank you.
Well, like many of you, my husband and I chose to live in Lexington. My husband was born and raised here, and he had deep roots in the community. And when we moved into Lexington 24 years ago, it was through the affordable housing program Lex had, and the community embraced us. When my husband lost his job in the early 2000s, and it took him nearly 3 years to find another full-time position with benefits, I negotiated for health care coverage for our family from my employer, even though I wasn't working full-time at the time. I learned to navigate a complex special education system of services for our daughter, and I have experienced the heartbreaking loss of a loved one to opiate addiction. And it's my family's story that motivates me to do what I do in the community and to run for public office. I understand how families struggle today, though they work even harder than ever. That seniors on a fixed income are limited as to what they can pay to continue to live in and support their communities. And the challenges that young adults face as they struggle with student debt and search for work. I believe in representation that champions quality public services that people need to overcome the challenges that they face every single day. My call to service is a call to improve the lives of all residents in the 15th Middlesex and across the Commonwealth. They deserve a living wage and affordable health care, housing, and educational equity for all children no matter where they live. fairness, opportunity, equality for all, clean air, clean water, protections for the environment. Serving as our next state representative is an opportunity to extend my call to service and to extend my leadership on critical issues we face in this district and beyond. Thank you.
I love this question. It's been asked, I think, 3 times in the last 3 debates. It's been asked pretty much everybody that meets me, why do you want to do this? My gut answer, and it's from the heart, I've wanted to do this my whole life. I've wanted to be at the State House working on legislation since I can remember. I remember as a young police officer watching Jay Kaufman run. As a police officer, I became union president. I spent 10 years working for my fellow police officers, developing language, supporting their work life and supporting their families, and up on Beacon Hill, watching legislation take shape, watching how it was done in the hallways, and loving every minute of it. I felt like I was at home there. I understood the process, I understood the language that was coming out, and I wanted to be part of it. Following being a local union official, I got elected 4 years as a national representative for the International Brotherhood of Police Officers, going up to Washington, D.C. and watching it happen there. That was a little bit too big for me. The State House is where I belong. It's a right setting. It's something I know I can sink my teeth into. I've seen legislation come out of Beacon Hill. I've been a policeman on the streets. I've been a school resource officer in the schools. And I've seen legislation come out that has not been effective. I've seen us be failed by legislation that is well-intentioned but poorly written. I enjoy going, digging into legislation, highlighting it, making comments in the sections and where I would improve, and I want to be a part of that process. I'm going to Beacon Hill because I've worked and seen legislation, because I'm going to have the benefit of all you telling me what you need in it, and I'll be able to write it and make sure it gets through and affects us all in a much better way. Thank you.
You know, it is a good question, and deciding to run is a difficult decision to make. You're under constant scrutiny. And I'm thankful to my wife and children and my parents who are here today for supporting me in this process. I couldn't do it without them. And in the end, I decided to run for a few reasons. Following the 2016 election, I saw the wave of young people with new ideas and who are beholden to no one running for office. I want to help bring new ideas and a new forward-looking vision to government. I hope that this district will want to be a part of choosing the next generation of political leaders who will work to change things, solve long-standing problems, and make our lives better. I was born and raised in Lexington, graduated LHS, class of 1999, and I want to give back for all that it's given me. I want to leave the world a better place than I found it, so that all our children can have a better future. I firmly believe that we all have ways to give back to our communities, no matter your background and expertise. What I know how to do, and do well, is learn about issues, listen to others, and use that knowledge to write and pass effective legislation and policy. I also want to show people that in these dark times and divided times, government can still be a beacon of good. No matter what happens in this race, I know some good has already come of my effort. My daughter has been going around collecting signatures so that Brianna Cohen can be our first female president. I keep saying I'm hoping we get one before that. She's only 8, so we'll work on that. But by the way, she'd be outstanding. So, you know, in the end, I'm also running because I have the experience, the vision, and the passion to get this job done right. And from my first day in office, I don't need to learn how to do this. I've done this job. I can be a powerful and effective voice for this district and what we stand for.
Whether you like or dislike the current administration in Washington and on Beacon Hill, few would disagree that these are turbulent times. And in many ways, a sad discord has risen around us where the noise and clamor of social media and the frenzied pace have kept us from truly connecting with one another. I believe Massachusetts is a great place to live, and that many of the things we choose to do together are exemplary. I also believe in the power of good government, having participated in some of the best and most promising government initiatives over the past several decades. But I know our democracy is currently fractured, and we must find ways to break some of the bad habits that have crept into our discourse. We must listen to one another, truly listen, and be able to hear multiple perspectives and piece those views together to create better policy. I am running because I believe I am in a unique position to bring a balanced and fair perspective to Beacon Hill. I have a broad and collaborative approach, steeped in experience and knowledge. My career has been comprehensive, and because of this, I am able to be effective. I have worked professionally in local and regional government for 25 years, and in recent years, I've run a small consulting firm. In Hudson, I helped launch a business association to support a robust buy local program, and I recently started a nonprofit to provide community arts and cultural activities. I am the only candidate who has served as a chief elected official, and presently the only candidate serving in a townwide elected office. I have built real things, conceived of legislation, passed it, and then implemented the program statewide and locally. I have spent nearly 8 years doing constituent services for residents in the district, helping people. I am running because I believe my extensive skills are those needed to be effectively fight for a fair and equitable society. I am running because I want to work to improve the lives of those in the district and across Massachusetts.
Thank you. Now the second question. What are the issues you care most about? If you were elected, what initiative would you take on first? Why do you think you are uniquely qualified for this initiative?
Given my extensive career, I care about a lot of things, but there are 4 major issues near and dear to me. Those are education, the environment, transportation, and public health. I plan to work on creating a visionary, forward-thinking transportation system that provides robust transit and bike and pedestrian options. Using innovative technologies, we can better coordinate our systems to create cleaner, faster, more efficient transit, to reduce congestion, reduce use of fossil fuels, reduce cut-through traffic, and just make it easier to get around the region. I will work to improve people's health by focusing on wellness and prevention, providing better childhood immunizations, preventative care, and helping folks to establish lifelong healthy habits. This will lead to better health outcomes, reversing the trend faced by young people today who are not expected to live as long as their parents' generation, and it will reduce future healthcare costs. I will focus on making Massachusetts a nationwide leader on environmental protection, advancing our efforts to build clean energy systems, accelerating our present greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, and bolstering our economy by being an innovator in this arena. We will eliminate toxins, have the safest water, the cleanest air, and ample open space for residents to enjoy. I will fight for universal free pre-K education, which will improve children's learning, their health, and their earning potential. I will advocate for fully funding tuition-free all-day kindergarten so that low and moderate income families are not disadvantaged. I will work to update the state's school funding formula to fully pay for the true cost of education, to take the pressure off the local property tax. And finally, I will press for strong technical vocational schools and affordable college for all. I have the experience and the capability to do these things. Thank you.
If I'm given the honor to represent this district, there are a few issues on which I would want to focus. One is education. Lexington has arguably the best schools in the country, but the same cannot be said for far too many districts in Massachusetts. I want to maintain Lexington's educational system, but I want to see the Commonwealth help other districts improve as well. I want to see increased support for vocational schools and alternative educational options. And I want to see funding for higher education increased so that more students can have access to a college education. I also want to ensure that the economy works for everyone, from top to bottom. I strongly support raising the minimum wage and efforts to reduce income inequality. I also want to help limit increases in health insurance premiums and medication costs. They are rising far faster than inflation, but we are not being provided with additional care or coverage. And public health is critical to me too. My wife is a professor of public health, so it's a top issue for me as well. All of this is meaningless, of course, if we have no good place to live. Thus, I will be a strong proponent of environmental protections and programs. I will push for an expansion of alternative energy options, and I'll work to improve and expand MBTA services. As I've done in my campaign, I will also make sure that I'm talking with you, the constituents, and serving your needs. What I stand for at my core is fighting for equality and the fair treatment of all people. This can only be achieved by listening to the people and hearing what they want. I will make it a point to meet with constituents of all backgrounds and seek their input as to what is needed. I am uniquely positioned to be effective in the legislature thanks to my time working in the State House. I know how to get things done, and I know the methods and maneuvers to use when legislation doesn't pass the first time, so that it can be successful the next time around. I also know that there are other ways to achieve your key goals, including using the budget and forming strong relationships with the executive agencies in the governor's office. I can be a strong advocate for this district. I know this job, and I'll be ready on day one. Thank you.
Keeping people safe is something I've done my entire life, and I've done it largely through listening. I don't intend and I don't want to wait until September 4th to listen. I don't want to wait until hopefully I'm elected. I do want to get elected, but prior to that, I want to hear what you all have to say. I have a small table in the back. It's got a business card on it. It has my cell phone on it. Please take one with you and give me a call. I need to learn more about what you think is important than what I think is important. That being said, I do have things I want to focus on. I too have lost someone very dear. I've lost 2 in-laws to our opioid crisis, and I plan to focus on it. School safety is important, is not a strong enough word to me. It's important and something I'm going to focus on. But perhaps today the most important one to me is giving a voice to people who literally can't speak for themselves. In my world, that means helping people with disabilities. In a broader sense, it's anyone that can't speak for themselves, whether it's because they literally can't speak physically, or because they don't understand our language, or because they're new to the country and they just don't know who to talk to. The only way we do that is by making sure we listen. I've spent my life as a police officer listening to people who had issues. I've spent my life as a coach, one of the former players is here in the audience, listening to players and trying to figure out how to get them to be part of a team, how to get them to understand the value of that. Listening is critical. Please take my business card, call me, and let me know what's important to you. You'll get my ear. Thank you.
For more than 20 years, I've stood up and spoken out for children, youth, and families. Since 2004, I've dedicated myself to improving public education in the town, in the state, and across this nation in any way that I could. For family engagement language in laws, for technologically advanced schools, for equal opportunity for all regardless of socioeconomic status. We're faced with competing and compelling priorities, and we need a courageous leader who isn't afraid to speak up and make change. My top 3 priorities in this race are to improve public education, including fair, adequate funding for K-12 that leads to expanding early education and care, improves career vocational technical education, and debt-free college options. Number 2, climate and the environmental justice, and quickly moving to 100% renewable energy. And 3, improving the lives of working people, including affordable health care, housing, and social, racial, and economic justice. If elected, I will strengthen the Progressive Caucus in the State House, and I will work with them to introduce, sponsor, co-sponsor legislation that moves this district and our Commonwealth forward. We are reaching crisis proportions with regard to underinvestment in our public structures, especially education and transportation. And so we should be funding the neediest cities and towns and other public structures with that funding for education. I have attained results, and my years as an outspoken issues advocate have earned me recognition by the Governor of the Commonwealth, Deval Patrick, who appointed me to the State Board. I will also take on changing the culture of sexual harassment and assault within the State House and on college campuses. Me Too is real, this movement, and workplace and campus abuse should be expanded to include non-sexual abuse behavior such as bullying and protection for individuals who may be targeted because of their sexuality, gender identity, or gender expression.
Folks, investing in our people is number 1 for me. And to continue on my earlier thought, the taxpayers of my Father's Day, they invested in him, and they got back every penny and then some. And I can tell you that the taxpayers that invested in me by giving me an affordable education that I could pay for by myself, they got back every penny that they invested in me and then some. And I can tell you that we're going to get back every penny in our students that we invest in and then some when we stop saddling them with massive debt that I think only enriches the wealthiest. Now, another incredibly important issue for me is clean energy and the environment. You know, when I was working in the legislature, we got the brownfields legislation passed, and as I understand it now, there are some 25 or 30 sites that have been reconditioned because of this legislation and returned to productive economic value. And when I say we did this, I don't mean it just happened around me when I happened to be at the legislature. I work for State Representative Peter Larkin, and he and us on the legislative staff, we were able to get this done, so I know how the legislative process works, and I know how to make sure that good legislation makes it through. You know, but cleaning up pollution is hard, and it's expensive, and we need to stop pollution at the source. Here in Massachusetts, we have an excellent model in the Toxic Use Reduction Act. You know, we used to hear about acid rain that was melting our statues and killing our fish, and it was awful. And you don't hear about it anymore because people and state government and communities got together with industry in order to fix that problem. And to be very clear, you have to have business at the table. Today, we're faced with the exact same issues when it comes to clean energy, and that means we have to, again, get people and state government and communities together, and we have to work with business in order to get it done. We're going to stick with the goals, and that doesn't mean letting business run the show or change our goals, but it does mean giving time for retooling, retraining, and making sure that we get there appropriately without affecting our economy negatively. My unique qualification, as I bring together the right public policy mix, 20 years of experience in business, and we're going to take this unavoidable process on together because there's just no ducking climate change.
Thank you. Now the third question. Many of us in this community, in the Asian American community, there's one thing that we are passionate about. It is the data disaggregation targeting Asian Americans. Now we, in the State House, we have the proposed bill H4408. That's a continuation of H3361. Continue to evaluate data disaggregation targeting Asian Americans and Latinos. So my question to the candidates are, what is your opinion on H4408 and in general data disaggregation based on race and ethnicity? And do you believe such a bill would hamper the equal rights for certain groups of people of color?
You know, folks, I'm going to admit that I was not aware of this legislation until the question was asked. You know, but I can tell you that as a chief technology officer for many companies, I'm an absolute believer in big data and good information and the critical role that it makes, that it gives us in good decision making. So I can see that you know, there may be some public policy benefit to it, and I broadly understand, you know, that point of view that maybe data disaggregation can be put to good use. But I'm going to also tell you that people are absolutely right when they choose to raise the alarm on this one. They're absolutely right to be concerned because data and information of this nature can be abused or misused. Now, I work in healthcare, and I'm entrusted every day with personally identifiable information and protected health information. And I've been a chief security officer almost as long as I've been a chief technology officer. And I know exactly what it takes to protect this kind of information. I know how to de-identify it so that it can be used strictly for trending and analysis and so that it can never be traced back to individuals. I've operated under HIPAA and high trust, and I've operated under the Massachusetts requirements for written information security programs if you handle this type of information. And I can tell you that there are levels of audit, and you have to provide evidence to prove that you're in compliance. And I'll tell you what, none of that is easy. So in my opinion, these are the types of safeguards that we have to have. So H4408 recommends a special commission to study this. If the commission chooses to, or if the commission is able to determine that there may be a compelling public interest in data disaggregation, I'll promise you that I'm going to vote against it unless all of the necessary safeguards, all of the necessary auditing, and the right approach, encryption, and the rest is in place, and I would have to be convinced it would absolutely occur before I would support it. Thank you.
So this is such an important question. I'm really glad that you raised it. And this bill established a special commission to investigate and study the feasibility and the effects of collecting disaggregate data. And I think even more importantly than what the bill says in something like this, I feel that I would get more from all of you instead of you just hearing me say my opinions about so many things, because I feel that you probably have some very strong opinions of your own. But I will say that Representative Taki Chan urges that all state agencies, quasi-state agencies, and entities created by state statute and subdivisions of state agencies to identify Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders as defined in the U.S. Census in all data they collect and report. And I am concerned that this could have unintended consequences, that it could be very dangerous, but again, I would really want to understand all of that and understand it from your perspective as well.
The question cites House Bill 4408, which I've read, and it's a commission, and I've got thoughts and comments on it I'm going to get to in a moment. But it stems from 3361, which was the bill that was put forward by Mr. Chan and by Mr. Wong. I'm not entirely certain what the motives were for putting this bill together. I don't know how they plan to use the data. I don't know how much data they intend to collect. I know that when I read 4408, the subsequent commission that was established and the 11 members that were put on it, there was no reference to having anyone on the commission that was a part of the community that was about to be changed by it. It would be my hope that the speaker in his wisdom would absolutely ask Mr. Chan or Mr. Wong to serve on it, but it doesn't identify that. It identifies many other groups that are going to represent that commission that may not have the same views as the people sitting in this room or the people most affected by it. I'm concerned about it. I'm very skeptical of the benefits of the way it's written, and as it is, I would not support it. I'd like to learn more about it. It's part of why I want you to email and call me. I want to sit with you and I want to hear what you have to say about it to educate me more so that when I do get there, I know the right answers. Thank you.
I am strongly opposed to this legislation and any that might emerge that are similar to it. I know the intent of this legislation was to provide groups with services targeted to their needs, but this is not a good way to do that. And I've already reached out to and spoken with many people in this room about this issue. A major issue is that under this legislation, there aren't a lot of groups that the census would have subcategories for, and Asian Americans is one of those targeted populations. All racial and ethnic groups have significant in-group variation, not just the Asian population. So it is not clear to me, why the Asian population was singled out here. Further, I feel that this bill divides people and makes Asians into sort of the others, so to speak, who are not somehow fully American. There's something else there. And people with Asian heritage have lived in America for generations, including our next door neighbors, who are Asian by descent, but were both born in the United States. I am very concerned that this type of data and information will end up being used to racially profile people. Human history shows how dangerous cataloging such distinctions can be. World War II showed us this in America, when this country shamefully interred the Japanese population. My family has seen firsthand what can happen when we divide people in this manner that the bill calls for. My grandmother fled Europe for the advance of the Nazis. Those in her family who remained did not survive. The dangers of dividing people here are just too great to support this. In the end, all people must be treated equally by the government and given the same opportunities. This legislation, and any others that might come along like it, sets those efforts back, creates real dangers, and is therefore a big mistake. And I would certainly not support H4408, certainly would not support H3361, or any similar legislation. Thank you.
I oppose H3361, and I don't think H4408 is ready for prime time either. This issue of data disaggregation has been polarizing the Asian communities and dividing us. Nothing has made me more sad than to see these divisions develop. Now more than ever, we need to stand together in solidarity, to work with one another instead of against one another. While some might think that H4408 is a good idea to create a commission to study the issue, I don't think we're ready to take that next step. We need to spend more time talking to one another and listening to all the varying perspectives before we are ready to move forward. There are some valid reasons for needing more detailed data on race and ethnicity. The most important reasons are to enable us to provide better health care and English language learning services. However, the use of data to fill quotas that are not merit-based pits one group against another, and I think that is misguided. We should focus instead on providing more services to those who are financially needy and falling behind because they can't get the education or human services they need. If down the road we revisit the idea of doing more data disaggregation, we should consider including all races and ethnicities in a voluntary rather than mandatory survey and prohibit the data from being used to fill quotas. Groups that are worried they need the data to get the services their group desires can encourage their members to take the voluntary survey, and those who fear the data might be misused should not be compelled or forced to provide it. I understand why people are concerned that these types of bills could threaten the equal rights of various groups, and I think we need to be very thoughtful on any new measures we propose to prevent unintended consequences.
Thank you. Now the fourth question. What are your favorite things to do outside of work? If you were elected, how would you celebrate? And how would you expect to change your daily life and your family life?
This is such a fun question, and I don't have a formal, written, prepared answer for something like this. But, you know, my favorite thing to do outside of work is gardening. Every year I plant a very large vegetable garden, and I'm sad to say this is the first year in about 15 years that I wasn't able to plant due to the campaign. You know, really, I work a tremendous number of hours already, and as a volunteer, as your volunteer selectman here in town, we're often at meetings until 11 o'clock at night, 3-4 nights a week, and at events all weekend long. So I actually don't expect that my daily life, if I'm elected, will change that much. Perhaps I'll get a few more nights at home, since the legislature only goes late at night during budget season and a few other times a year. But in truth, it's more likely that I'll be out among the community at your meetings, at the community's events, serving the district on a regular basis. So I don't think my life will change all that much. And as to how I'll celebrate, well, I haven't thought that far ahead. I'm just trying to get through one day at a time and hope for the best.
You know, I know it may sound corny, but my genuinely favorite things to do in the world are play with my children and just sit and talk with my wife. She can tell you I get a bit unhappy when I don't get to see her enough. So for my leisure, you know, I certainly admit I enjoy watching some TV. I very much enjoy watching the Red Sox, listening to music, by the way, particularly Bruce Springsteen, if any Springsteen fans in here. So, you know, I like to unwind by reading. When I have free time to read, which is not that often, but I read books on politics and religion, and I don't really find it work to read legislation or political thought. I actually enjoy this stuff. It's why I joined academia and became a professor. It's part of why I'm running. So you can know, by the way, I'm going to read that legislation carefully. I actually look forward to it. So win or lose, you know, how would I celebrate? Well, the night of the election will include an event. So, you know, first, I guess I would celebrate that way with anyone who wanted to come. In private, you know, just some quiet time with my family and some TV, then back to work the next day. As I know from firsthand experience at the State House, just how challenging this job is, and just how much work it takes to get it right. No, if I were to win, there'd certainly be some changes to my life. But honestly, as an academic, I already teach at night. So it might not actually be that big a change in that regard, you know, outside of budget week, and that's certainly going to be a strict one. The biggest change, I guess, is I won't get summers off anymore. But for anyone here who's an academic, you know you don't exactly get the summer off anyway. You're still working during that summer, so not that big a change. But, you know, despite that, having worked at the State House and seen firsthand what a difference you can make in people's lives, and I mean you can literally save people's lives, I believe the work is worth all the effort. As I said, we all have a way to give back to our community. For me, my whole educational and professional life has been spent learning how to make good public policy, and then going out and getting that job done. Thank you.
This is an awfully fun question. I'm going to enjoy answering every bit of this. What are your favorite things to do outside of work? I'm a coach. I kind of already said that. But coaching is something that comes easy to me. I've coached our youth soccer leagues. I coached Little League. I've coached Pop wanted football. I was invited to be the parent volunteer coach for the Lexington High School football team, so it's in me. And obviously that has something to do with my children. My daughter played soccer, both of my sons baseball and football, and I enjoyed doing that the entire time. I have continued coaching in one form or fashion right along the whole time. How would you celebrate if you were elected? I said before, I've wanted to do this my whole life, so a party's not going to do it. I'm throwing a parade, and I hope you're all invited to march with me. It would be fantastic. It would be a lifelong dream coming true, and the parade is right up my alley. How would I expect my daily life and family to change? I plan on being a full-time state representative. I plan on diving into it 100%. Right now, I'm employed at a company that takes care of people that have special needs. My president has supported me the entire way, but he knows that September 4th, life may change for me. Should I get elected, I'll be diving straight into seeing what you all need, not just supporting people with disabilities, but supporting our entire community. So I can see my daily life being occupied by all of you as opposed to the people I'm currently supporting. Thank you.
This really was a breath of fresh air question, so thank you for asking it. The things that I really like to do relate to my just creativity. I'm an artist and a musician. I enjoy yoga and walking meditation. I'm also a maker. I love to make stuff, all kinds of stuff, from dinner to socks to paintings. I just love to participate in all of it. I think that, you know, no one runs for office all on their own, so you would have to acknowledge everybody on election night, no matter the outcome. And I certainly would hope all of my family could come, all of the campaign staff, and any supporters who are able to make it. That would be great. And maybe we'd even have some firecrackers and some special effects. I'm not going to say where they would come from, though. But and I think, you know, my daily life is pretty engaged as it is. Over the years, I've had to learn to fit in some sanctuary time, time for to be alone, to gather my energy. When I'm out with a lot of people, it's very exciting, it's very encouraging. I love it, I love people, but I'm one of those people who needs to find quiet time to recharge and to re-engage. So over the years, I've learned to take long walks on a regular basis, in addition to early morning sitting, meditation, yoga, but really so that I'm able to be present every day. And I think also the importance of connecting back to all of the folks in our district. So it is visiting people in Woburn, in Lexington, at the various community groups that exist in our diverse community, and really meeting with everybody on a regular basis. I think those would be areas I would be most intentional about.
You know, my favorite thing to do outside of work is just be a dad. I have two, you know, really great daughters. I coached both of them for, I think it was at least 7 years through the Lexington Youth Lacrosse League, right up until the time that they went to high school and I just couldn't coach them anymore. My oldest daughter is into theater and the arts, so I spent summers, many summers, building sets, working production and helping putting on plays through Lexington Youth, summer theater. I get a great enjoyment now. I can go to the high school, I can see my daughter playing JV, and when I look at JV and varsity, I see a lot of the folks, a lot of the girls that I coached, and I take, you know, great pleasure in that. You know, my favorite holiday gift this year was a telescope, so one of my summer goals is to look up and actually see Saturn and see Saturn's rings with the telescope that I got, and hopefully get a couple of pictures of it. And so I'm hoping for clear skies and a new moon right around the middle of the month, because my understanding is that's the best time. So that's a little bit about me and, you know, kind of what I do in my personal time. I hadn't really thought too much about what to do were I to be elected. I'll just say I think I'm going to end up saying thank you quite a bit for a long time after. You know, my family situation is such that Abigail's going to college in less than 2 months, I think it is. She's going to school down south. We're going to start a little early. My youngest daughter is getting her driver's license, and she's already very independent. And that means that a lot of the time that I've devoted to being a father is coming back to me. I'm going to be an empty nester, and I'm not married. So I think, you know, at this phase of my life, My family situation and my time situation is changing. I'm looking forward to getting back to the civic and political life that I have as a younger man that had to be somewhat postponed, becoming a dad and being a parent, a single parent for a long time. And hopefully it'll take the form of representing all of you. So thank you.
Thank you. So in recent years, there have been more and more discussions about racial disparities, that a race is underrepresented or overrepresented in various contexts, such as college admissions, school discipline, and in the social justice systems. So the racial disparities could be coming from a number of factors, including discrimination, including cultural differences affecting people when it comes to making choices, and many other factors. So the question we have for the candidates is that it's two-parted. What does racial equality mean to you? Does it mean equal opportunity or equal results? Second part, what would you do as a state representative to address racial disparities?
I believe in equal opportunity, and I think you're never going to get equal results. And I'm not even sure you can get true agreement on what equal results would really mean. It's just too complicated. Everybody takes their own sort of thoughts and experiences, into that. But while I'm not sure that there could ever be equal results, I can tell you that results can be equitable. Results can be fair, even if they are unequal. I think that economics is really the great equalizer. And I think attempts to divide us along racial lines on one side and efforts to promote things like identity politics on the other side, I firmly believe that any and all of it just serves to continue to divide us. And I think it just serves to continue to have those that have continue to have. And I think it serves to those that don't have to continue to not have what they should have economically. So I really believe that reducing wealth and income inequality is the surest way I know to reduce racial disparity. So, as your state representative, I do everything in my power to create economic opportunity for everybody willing to take advantage of it. I would do everything in my power to level the playing field, and that's why one of my highest priorities is education, and that's a good start. But people just don't need a job. They need access and the means to have actual ownership in the workplace. Employees should own or share in the ownership of the businesses that they work at. People need access to capital, and they need to be able to start their own businesses. So that's why I believe in workplace democracy. So that means if I'm in the legislature, programs like Economic Development Tax Incentive and the Massachusetts Small Development Center, when they coach and they give grants and they do their mission, they're going to have to start including cooperatives, employee-owned businesses, and businesses that embrace workplace democracy. So just to reiterate, I think race and identity used to divide us and keep the rich richer and make the poor poorer. I think the best remedy to racial disparity is to reduce wealth and income inequality, and with good public policy we can do it.
Racial equality comes from acknowledging past and current inequalities and providing an infrastructure to allow all people to thrive. And I think, I'll just go back to all my work in advocacy. I will be your advocate. I will be everyone's advocate to make those arguments to address racial disparities. And I kind of want to, I will look to all the various ethnic groups here in town to lead the way. I think at times we all need to meet together. This is such an important issue. I think that with respect to the school discipline challenges that we're hearing a lot about, the law that went into effect to start collecting that data was established in 2012, and it didn't get enacted in the data port collecting until 2014, and it had to go for 3 years. So this is the fourth year, and this is why I believe we're hearing so much about it. That plus the extraordinarily high rates of discipline among students needing special education and those who are Black and brown students. At the college level, I feel that if all are qualified and deemed to be able to do the work, preference should be given to those who are economically disadvantaged, and perhaps some lottery system could be used. I don't know. We need to hear more about some of this work. I know that MIT, Stanford, and other schools are already eliminating fees and tuition for people in economically disadvantaged situations with a certain economic income. And so I really, again, I think in areas like, well, the marijuana question is coming up later, but in this particular case, that's an opportunity for people who have been stigmatized and been incarcerated, primarily black and brown people, should be given the opportunity to go first for entrepreneurship in this particular area.
The question starting out with, what does racial equality mean to you? To me, there's a phrase that I learned a long time ago, and I don't remember where I learned it, but it has to do with how we view people here in the United States, or how I believe we should view people in the United States. To me, it's the content of your character that matters, not the color of your skin or where you came from. Here, everyone should have an equal opportunity to develop their character to become the best they can be. The follow-up question here, equal opportunity or equal results, I find equal results a difficult one to make work in the real world, and I cite the most obvious example of the day for us to use. Equal results would mean you're going to have 5 state reps on September 4th. We all have an equal opportunity to be here. We're all taking advantage of that, but equal results, and we're all going to be in that little office together. So I don't know if that works as a system. I would plan to continue to listen. I've commented on my cards back there. I do really want you to take them. Equal opportunity matters to me. It's something that I found as a core principle, as a police officer, mattered. Making sure people felt safe to avail themselves of all the opportunities there is a primary concern of mine. Thank
you. Well, I believe firmly that America must provide an equal opportunity for all citizens, but we have not yet achieved that. You see discrimination that exists everywhere, even here in this district. I've spoken with many of the people here today, and I know one of the big concerns is one that is sadly not new. It is the same thing people have said about so many other groups, including my ancestors, that we are the other in society. We don't play fair. We take opportunities from others, and we're only focused on educating our children and not on helping build the town. This was false then, and it's false now. As we all know, no group of people all wants the same thing. I know as well that a big issue is admission to college. I do not support caps, explicit or not, on the number of people from any group who can attend a school. And this is a personal issue for me as well, as my grandfather was kept out of most medical schools because they only had one spot open to Jews, and they took a different one. This should not happen. By the way, in time, he turned out to be one of the most respected doctors in his community. I also support any group looking to improve relations between minorities and the police. Most police officers, of course, are good people, but there are some who create tensions and troubles on all sides of these issues. But it's been sickening to see these reports, night after night. Black people killed by police, of white people calling the police on black people, sleeping in dorms, having a picnic, or sitting in a Starbucks. Part of addressing this is criminal justice reform. People of color are far more likely to end up in jail than are white persons who committed the same crime. We see it in our schools. In Lexington, minority students face much harsher punishments for the same infractions than white students do. I have been working on this issue and was the only candidate to attend and speak out at school committee meetings, including a meeting earlier this week regarding the need to address this problem. We must support people as individuals, and when individuals form groups to protect their rights, we must support those groups. I will be a powerful voice for minorities. My family and I have experienced what it's like to be different. We should never be afraid to speak out and never be silent when we see injustice. We need to do a better job of listening to one another and understanding how we got here and where to find our way out. We can't let anyone live in fear. We end that now. Thank you.
When considering racial equality, I think we all have a responsibility to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to succeed, regardless of their race, ethnicity, sex, sexual orientation, age, physical or mental ability, or national origin. I also think it's incumbent upon us to work to create an inclusive society. I'm proud of my record and efforts throughout my 25-year career to help hire, select, elect, and promote people of color and with diverse backgrounds. I make it my focus to go out of my way to invite everyone in under one big tent. Those who know me know I show up at your forums, I go out to the community, and I recruit people to join committees. I encourage people to run for office. I fundraise for minority candidates across the Commonwealth and even out of the state. I push our managers to hire a diverse workforce, and I look for talent among all groups. As a Lexington selectman, we have just established a diversity task force and funded it at town meeting. Last year, we issued a proclamation, which was a clear policy statement to make sure everyone knows we stand for being a welcoming, inclusive community. We take action to prosecute and address any hate crimes or acts of discrimination and work diligently to eliminate this behavior from our community. Lexington has seen some meaningful successes in recent years as we've appointed and elected more people of color throughout our government. But we have also seen setbacks with disturbing information about school discipline being unequally applied across the races. We can and must do better. I will work to eradicate any discriminatory behavior and to make sure everyone has a chance to succeed. But I also think we should focus more on how we are all similar rather than our differences, and spend more effort worrying about those unable to lift themselves up because they are mired down in poverty. If elected, I will bring to the State House some of the best practices and policies we have employed here in Lexington to encourage citizen engagement from all groups.
So our next question is on two different topics. So what are your thoughts on tax burdens and public transportation?
It was hard to know how to answer this one because it was two totally different thoughts, but I'll just say a little bit. I have been engaged in public transportation and transit issues for a significant portion of my career. I served on the Metro West Regional Transit Authority Board, and when I chaired the sub-region that included 13 towns, including Lexington, I was the person who initiated one of the first suburban mobility studies in the Commonwealth to help look at how we coordinate all of our various vans and private shuttles and transportation services, which were not well coordinated. We're still making progress in that area. When I was president of the Metropolitan Area Planning Council back in 2014, we spent a significant amount of time developing a white paper and policy statement on transportation and the needs we have to invest in additional transportation options. We recommended policy changes, and we are working to implement those changes. We recommended revenue sources. So I have an extensive experience and career working on transportation issues, including on bike and pedestrian matters. When I was president of MAPC, it was my idea to create the statewide Complete Streets program, which is a program to help encourage cities and towns to make their streets more bike and pedestrian friendly to accommodate users of all ages and abilities. I was able to get that legislation passed in the Transportation Bond Bill and was invited by MassDOT to serve on the working group when we developed that program. And here in Lexington, I brought it home, got us to pass a policy, got us to implement that policy, and we were able to win funding through that program to improve zones around the schools. So I have extensive experience in transportation. I really understand the field quite well, and I'm looking forward to putting that knowledge to work for you. Regarding tax burden, there's no question it's been climbing, especially on the real estate taxes. And those communities that can afford to levy taxes do better with their services in schools because they charge residents more. But it's an unequal system across the Commonwealth that leaves many cities and towns behind. And it's really unacceptable because we have lots of towns that can't afford the services we have here in Lexington, and I think that's something we need to correct.
This is a difficult issue, and I know paying taxes is difficult. Taxes are already high, and it's critical that the government spend tax revenue on reasonable and effective programs and not waste our money. For just this reason, when I worked on the budget at the State House, among the first questions I would always ask was if a program was necessary and if it was producing the expected benefits and was cost effective. Taxes are, however, also necessary. They're what provide services we depend on, such as police, fire, education, and transportation. But we can make the system more fair. Massachusetts has a flat tax system. I support the Fair Share Amendment, which will raise roughly $2 billion in additional funding by raising tax rates only on very high wage earners and spend that money on education and transportation. I support it in major part because I want to see a fair tax system in which the burdens of supporting our needs and services and maintaining society does not fall primarily on the backs of those who can least afford it. I do not want to see tax increases on the lower and middle classes. And I have, by the way, met numerous wealthy people who are going to be impacted by this and who support the Fair Share Amendment for these exact reasons. As for transportation, well, it's part of my platform. Many people rely on public transportation to get to work or take their children to daycare. When the MBTA is unreliable or does not have a route to take people where they need to go, that harms families and the economy. And it makes it harder for people to live in the communities they want to. It's a basic question of fairness. This is also an environmental question. The more people who use public transportation, the fewer the cars on the road, and thus the lower level of greenhouse gas emissions. It's also a win for commuters who drive, by the way, as it'll decrease congestion on the roads. To this end, I want to see an expansion of MBTA service. Right now, if you want to get from Lexington to Waltham on the MBTA, you better hope you don't need to get there quickly. This should not be. I want to see more routes and improved services, and I do not want to raise the price for riding the T, which will mainly harm those who can least afford it. I believe the Fair Share Amendment is critical to achieving all this without raising taxes on low and middle income families. Thank you.
I was on the T back in the wintertime, this past winter, and was shocked not only at the delays in the system. The particular car I was on was poorly heated. It was extremely poorly heated. I recall back when I used to ride the T on a regular basis thinking one part of this, that in 1969 we put a man on the moon. But since then, we've been unable to keep the T on time or heated properly. It's incredible to me that the people that have been overseeing it haven't been able to put it together right. It needs attention. It needs people to look at it with fresh eyes, someone that hasn't been a part of it over and over again, but has ridden it over and over again and knows where the downsides are. It's going to be a part of my focus. As for the tax burden, I'm going to bring back a little bit. I'm fiscally conservative. It's going to be hard to get me to agree to new taxes. I think we spend an awful lot of our state's money, an awful lot of your money, on things that probably could be a lot more efficient. As a part of a topic we discussed earlier today, having to do with 4408. 4408 itself is a commission. Almost every bill that goes to the Hill seems like it has a commission attached to it, with a fund that goes along with it, with a study and another fund that goes along with that. A lot of them are probably needed. A lot of them probably are not. My goal is to look at everything financially when we get to the State House and start determining, do we really need commissions for this? Is this a matter of an obvious, yes, send it forward? Is there a more efficient way we can spend your money before we ask you for more? Thank you.
I always like what Noah Berger, president of the Mass Budget and Policy Center, says when thinking about government. He says that many people think government is some big blob out there and they don't really understand what it's all about. But I think most of us understand that government is us, and it's what we choose to do together. And the way that we fund these things, roads and bridges, parks and libraries, clean air and clean water, prisons and the courts, the way we fund these public structures is through taxes. And if we're going to start talking about taxes, then we must acknowledge two critically important things. Number one, they're inadequate, and number two, they're unfair. So decisions that were made in the late 90s and early 2000s have reduced state revenues by $3 to $4 billion every year. And that's called a structural deficit. And every year we start out $3 to $4 billion short when the state budget is being built. And we have, as a consequence, that's why we're seeing reduced money going into public education, public transportation, parks and recreation, etc. And before we can begin to increase taxes on most of us who already are paying a higher share of our income on taxes, I will work on three things. Number one, to see that a full audit of our state's tax expenditure portfolio is reviewed and evaluated, ensuring we are taxing the things we mean to. Number two, review the payments in lieu of taxes of large nonprofits. And number three, look at closing corporate tax loopholes. I'm proud to be one of the 10 original signers of the Fair Share Amendment to get this initiative going that asks people making more than the rest of us to pay a little more of their fair share of taxes, leading to better funding for public education and public transportation.
You know, folks, when it comes to my thoughts on taxation, I think there's a couple of truths. Most people feel that they're taxed enough already, or they want to see their taxes come down, and that's why we have a ballot question potentially about lowering the sales tax. I think people also believe that shifting the tax burden to the wealthiest seems to make sense to them, and so we have the proposal for the fair share, or some people call it the millionaire's tax. You know, I think we need to take a fresh approach. I think we already have different classifications of income, particularly W-2, capital gains, Schedule K, and inheritance and dividends. And I think we can agree that they represent income derived from different classes of property. And here I'm going to actually read from the Constitution of Massachusetts the way it's stated. Such tax may be levied at different rates upon income derived from different classes of property, but shall be levied at a uniform rate throughout the Commonwealth upon incomes derived from the same class of property. So my read is that capital gains, which I think is wealth begetting wealth, and I think that's money working for you, versus W-2 income, which is people working for a living, clearly fits the definition of income derived from a different class of property. I think we can differentiate our tax system within the structure that we have today without amending the Constitution, and I do think if your money works for you, you need to pay more. And I think if you work for your money, you probably pay enough, or maybe you need to pay a little bit less. And I think that's the fresh approach that we need to take. And when it comes to transportation, the simple fact is we need to invest in our infrastructure heavily. My understanding is that for every $1 billion we borrow, we're going to have to pay back $60 million in debt service over 30 years. That's a lot of money, but I think we have to do it. All these folks here have told you all the whys. I'm just going to tell you the how. We're going to have to borrow. It pains me to say it, but I think it has to be done. So if you can see that you agree with my approach on taxation, I say we take the differences that we can do in income and we target those towards the debt service that we're going to have to do on transportation and infrastructure. And I believe this approach is in keeping with what we can do under the current structure. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it's almost 11 o'clock. This is likely our last question before we do the closing statement. And we have four important questions left. So I'm going to read it to the audience, and I will let the candidate pick the question that I feel that they feel most strong about. So the last four questions, one of them is about the balance between protecting in the environment and economic development. The next one is, what would you do to improve the education system? And we also have a question on recreational marijuana sale, and a question on undocumented immigrants and sanctuary state.
So this is kind of a speed round, huh? I have to pick on the fly. I'm gonna talk about the education system. It's something that's very important to me. And I've already talked about what we need to do at the university level. So let's talk about it at the different levels. I just don't believe in charter schools. I think that they're a drain on our public school system and public resources. They're not accountable to the local community. They're private entities seeking private profit, the same way we have a private for-profit prison system. Their goal is expansion. Their goal is privatization. And it's not about innovation or education, and I just don't agree with it. My information tells me that financial impacts up until 2016 was about a $420 million drain, and that's approaching $450 million as we go forward. I just think we need to end the charter school system and bring that money back into public education and bring the students back with it. Yeah, but second, it's not just all about the money. We need to rethink what public schools have to offer. Not everybody is best served by traditional education, and not everybody should be prepared to go to university. Some people are just not suited to it, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We need to put much, much more focus on vocational and technical training for some folks, and let families and students sort it out for themselves if that's the right path for them. We need mechanics, electricians, builders, carpenters, chefs, and these also have the benefit of being the types of employment where people can be self-employed or they can work together, and it gets towards what I think the economy needs to move towards, which is employee ownership of business. You know, we need wind and turbine technicians, which is the fastest growing job in America. We need solar installers and clean engineers, because those are the jobs of the future. You know, the tragedy is that there are only about 22 regional vocational schools like we have here at Minuteman, which I think is really a class school and needs to be emulated around the Commonwealth. And I think that these two changes are going to make our public school system vastly superior, and I think it's going to be the model that's going to be other states that are going to follow it. Thanks.
I'm going to try and do a little bit from each of the questions, understanding that we haven't really gone a full deep dive on any of these topics. So my thoughts about balancing and protecting the environment with respect to economic development, I believe we must maintain protections for the environment as a priority, no matter what. And we only have one Earth, the pale blue dot that Carl Sagan talked about. There's only one Earth. And so I will ensure that we proceed with smart growth and development, increased opportunities for small business and entrepreneurs, while advancing workers' rights. And of course, the best economic driver is to invest in education for our children, especially for early education and care, and for those considered high risk. Strong community prosperity includes affordable housing and a robust transportation system. As far as continued education system improvement, I think it's widely understood that disparities in educational opportunity and achievement are no accident. They're the result of decades of educational injustice, of choices made in Washington, D.C. and in the State House and in local communities and schools. They're the result of choices that were perhaps politically expedient, but that systematically have left children from underserved communities with an inadequate and incomplete education, and that has to change. We also need to focus on the school-to-prison pipeline as a result. Considering the marijuana sale, marijuana's positive effects have been documented by the U.S. Institute of Medicine and American College of Physicians and other sources, and it's very helpful with those who are dealing with opiate use addiction. And regarding the undocumented immigrant and sanctuary city, we should be a sanctuary state. In fact, the State House has in its hands right now the opportunity to make it so, and they have been sitting on that decision for some time. And if that question has to go to the ballot, I think it would pass, but the State House legislators should do their job and make Massachusetts a sanctuary state.
So reading them over, I liked question number 7. What were my thoughts on the balance between protecting the environment and economic development? I think it's not only a balance, I think one serves off the other and one requires the other. Emerging technologies is something that we continually need. At one point in time, our ancestors were all riding around in buggies and had horses, and we needed faster modes of transportation. And emerging technology figured out how to use bicycles and automobiles in a much better motorized way. Continuing on that thought, our environment is now impacted by those technologies. We need to emerge again and come up with better systems for protecting the environment and yet improving our efficiency in transporting each other from place to place. I love the idea of wind technology. I'd like to see that expand. Solar technology could be far, far, far improved. We have solar panels across the entire roof of our building in Woburn, where we take care of people with disabilities. It does an adequate job, but it certainly could be far, far better. By improving that technology, you automatically protect the environment. I don't see them as being so much of a balance as feeding off one another and being necessary to each other.
I'm going with education. So, ensuring that all students across Massachusetts receive a high-quality education is critical to me. We are a Commonwealth, and we must live up to that name. Too many times we are not. I am the only candidate with 2 young children, just starting out in the public schools, so this issue is obviously of great importance to me. One challenge facing many districts is lack of adequate funding. The property values in the community should not determine the quality of education that children receive. The Commonwealth should use the Foundation Budget Review Commission report as a guideline to ensure state money is being used effectively to help communities improve their schools. I am also generally a proponent of providing local school districts and teachers with greater flexibility. Not every student is best served in a traditional classroom. I want to see more room for innovation within the public school system. To that end, I am not a supporter of using standardized testing as the main tool to evaluate educational systems. It leads to an inflexible curriculum and to teaching to the test. We also need to consider higher education, the community college and state university systems. We need to ensure that everyone who earns their way into a state college or university can afford to go. Part of what has made state schools unaffordable is that the legislature has repeatedly cut funding for higher education, with costs being passed to students. I would strongly oppose such cuts. I remember at the last debate someone claiming that professor salaries were one of the big problems here. But in fact, public college and university professors have largely been working without pay increases and with no long-term contract for years now. In reality, the cost increases, much of them, are from unnecessary administrative expenses, and these costs have risen rapidly, and this leads to increases in costs to the system and thus to students. In addition, not every student succeeds in the traditional primary school environment, or wants or needs to go to college, so we need to look more broadly at proper funding for vocational schools, community colleges, and job training programs as well. We need to provide a range of opportunities so that everyone can get the training and advantages that they need. Thank you. Oh, and by the way, I'm happy to talk about any of the other questions back at the table afterwards.
I'm going to try and touch a little bit on each of the questions if I can, but I'll start by saying that with respect to the energy, for the environment and economic development, I don't believe the two are mutually exclusive. We've seen here in Lexington and elsewhere that you can build new things with best management practices and actually improve the environment. When we authorized the redevelopment over at Hayden Ave, they took impervious area off that site and improved the inflow of water into the ground, and made the site less of an impact on the nearby wetlands and forests. So it is possible to do both, and obviously as we work together to improve our buildings, we can create more energy efficient buildings. I'm proud of Lexington's effort to advance the Getting to Net Zero Task Force, which will help us become net zero in our building sector within 25 years. So I think you can do both, and as a proponent of smart growth who has participated with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council for decades in advancing smart growth principles, I also know that transit-oriented development and clustering development near transit opportunity is the way to go for the future in terms of both protecting the environment and allowing for new growth. So with respect to improving the school systems, I do think we should fully fund the recommendations of the Foundation Budget Review Commission. We need to correct the funding formula so that all schools get fair reimbursement for key accounts like employee benefits and special needs and school transportation and English language learners. There's a number of unfunded accounts that need to be addressed, and I think we should provide universal pre-K. We have discontinued the kindergarten grants, which I think is problematic because what that has done is require some communities to actually charge parents if they want their children to attend all-day kindergarten. I think that's wrong, and we need to fund that. I also think we need more robust technical and vocational schools and to make college more affordable. Regarding marijuana, I was one of the selectmen that advanced the question at the town meeting to not have it be legal here in Lexington. I understand it is a statewide rule, but Lexington and Woburn both voted against that ballot measure, and I think we should take our time on how we implement that and take a wait-and-see approach.
Thank you. Now the closing statement.
Back at me, huh? It has been a true joy for me to serve as your selectman for going on 5 years. I am constantly inspired by the brilliant ideas, terrific civic engagement, and incredible effort put forth by our volunteers to make our community a better place. Having served on the Mass Municipal Association Board for 3 years, and on the Local Government Advisory Commission appointed by the Governor, I know that not all towns are as fortunate as Lexington and Woburn. Many communities lack the resources and the human capital to make positive change and provide what is needed for residents. Despite the fact that this is a great commonwealth, Massachusetts suffers from significant income inequality. The top 1% of income earners actually take home 30% more than 99% of the rest of the wage earners in Massachusetts. This has set up a system that does not allow everyone to succeed. I want to head to Beacon Hill to reverse that trend. We need to invest equally in all our communities so that everyone can prosper. To do this, I believe we should pass the Fair Share Amendment to make our tax system more progressive. I believe we need to raise the minimum wage to a living wage so that the average worker can actually afford to support a family. I believe we need to invest heavily in education and transportation so we can build the kind of society we want tomorrow. While my views and positions may seem similar to many of my colleagues up here this morning, I have a proven track record of getting things done. I have relationships with legislators and state agency officials, with mayors and boards of selectmen throughout Massachusetts. I can reach across the aisle and listen to everyone's voices and make sure they're being heard. And I've been doing the job of serving constituents for all these years. There is no one more prepared or more qualified than I am to jump in and be your next state representative. I ask for your vote on September 4th.
Thank you again. It's been an honor to be here, and it's been a privilege to share the stage with my fellow candidates. Part of why I'm running is to focus on key policy issues. I was the first candidate to offer policy statements, and the only one to provide them on the day I announced my candidacy, so that everyone would always know where I stand on the issues. I believe my experience gives me advantages in achieving my policy goals. I have written and passed legislation at the State House. I have built consensus with people across the political spectrum, among Democrats and with Republicans. And I know that no one gets anything done in government by themselves. I know how to work, and have successfully worked, with the current Speaker of the House, which is not always easy. I have stood up to the special interest groups. I know what tactics to use if legislation doesn't pass the first time, so that it can be successful next time. And I know how to work with the governor's office, under Democrats and Republicans. These are not skills you can learn elsewhere. While my work at the local and federal levels provided great experiences, they provided me with different skills than those I needed at the State House, where the rules, procedures, and personalities are very different from those at other levels. The skills I gained working at the State House can take years to learn, but I will be ready from the start. We all know people at the State House, but that's not the real focus here. I am the candidate with the experience and knowledge of the legislative process to get this job done. I have dedicated my educational early career, teaching, and personal life to government. I am committed to using my experiences to serve my community by enacting policies that will help everyone in our district and our Commonwealth. I care deeply for our district and its citizens, and I will reach out to everyone in our community to hear your views and needs. I will fight every day to see that all our residents have the benefits you and your families deserve: high-quality education, strong government services and public safety, living wages, equal pay for equal work, healthcare access, and a healthy environment. I have a proven track record at the State House. With my experience, I know I'll be a strong and effective voice for our district from day one. I promise to keep working hard to earn your vote, and I hope you'll want to learn more about me and get involved in the campaign. Thank you.
Well, thank you, CALex, for putting this together. Thank you to the other candidates being here this morning, and thank you all for sharing your morning with me. Again, it is beautiful out there, and I appreciate your time. As I said when we opened this morning's forum, in one form or fashion, I've always found myself in service of the public. Whether in my career as a police officer, at New Path in support of people living with disabilities, or in the activities I've chosen to volunteer my time toward. Supporting our community and the people living in it is and always will be part of me. As a volunteer coach with our youth soccer, baseball, and football programs, I helped our young people learn the value of commitment and teamwork. As a member of the Lions Club, I've taken pride in supporting our annual carnival and serving meals at the Carroll Center for the Blind. As a former town meeting member, I actively worked to make sure that voters in my precinct were listened to and represented. During my career with the police department, I committed myself to my fellow officers by serving as a local union executive for nearly 10 years, and then on the national level for an additional 4 years. My campaign has been endorsed by the 23,000 members of the Massachusetts Police Association. Their endorsement not only recognizes my past service, but inspires me to service in the future. As a school resource officer, I saw firsthand the value of collaboration between incredible people in our school system and the dedicated men and women of our public safety departments. This kind of collaboration is so critical to the success at our State House and yet today seems to be so lacking from the daily routine of our elected officials. As your state representative, I would look to draw on my experience that I gained as a police officer, as a director in the human services field, and as a community volunteer to bring a common sense perspective to a state house that is desperately in need of common sense. My name is Joe Lahiff. I'm running for state representative in your district, and I'm asking for your vote on September 4th. Thank you.
There's a lot at stake in this election. I'm running to continue to represent bold values in the State House because we need to have the courage to stand up for those values that improve people's lives, investing in public education and public transportation, creating jobs for the future, protecting our environment, and addressing climate change and the opioid public health crisis. I've become a prominent voice for public education, and as a member of the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education's Budget Subcommittee, I prioritized the department's $5 billion budget for social emotional learning, reduced testing, media literacy, civics, arts, and comprehensive health education, Safe Schools program, and increased funding for Medco. I believe that millionaires should pay their fair share, and I was also proud to have been asked by the Raise Up Massachusetts Coalition to lead on better funding for public transportation and public education as one of 10 original signers of the Fair Share Amendment, the Millionaire's Tax. This initiative has been championed by our own representative, Jay Kaufman. The issues we face in our district and beyond need a courageous leader who isn't afraid to speak up and make change. I'm running for state representative because I'm dedicated and committed to our shared values of fairness, opportunity, and equality for all. It's my proven track record advocating for our shared values that brings results and has earned me the endorsements of two leading statewide progressive groups, Mass Alliance and Progressive Democrats in Massachusetts, who believe that I am the best candidate who will continue to do this as our next state representative. I ask for your vote on Tuesday, September 4th. Thank you.
Folks, thanks for being here, giving up your beautiful Saturday morning. The good news is we still have plenty of rest of the day to enjoy. I'm going to go and barbecue with the neighbors, and so hopefully you guys have some equal plans to get out. You know, I'm running for state representative, where one of the reasons I'm running for state representative is that an opportunity that I had, in this case it was for my ability to be able to work through college and pay for it myself, you know, that today that doesn't exist, that isn't an option. And as I said before, you know, equal opportunity, that's the important thing. And that's not the only opportunity that's been lost to us, but it's the one that really struck me. You know, back in college, you know, I believed in a living wage, jobs that paid a living wage, affordable health care. I believed in clean energy. We knew that we needed to have environmental protection, and we knew that quality public education was essential. And at the same time, I knew that we needed to confront the systemic issues that we have that persist in giving us wealth and income, inequality, and inequitability. You know, from there I was driven to go into the public sector. I worked in Washington, D.C. I worked at the Massachusetts State House because I just didn't want to be a spectator when it came to politics and civic life. As I settled in here in Lexington, I did move on to the private sector. I became the Chief Technology Officer of several private equity-backed healthcare services and technology companies. At home, I was able to coach, I was able to be a good dad and spend a lot of time with my daughters. But all the while, I really have been striving to be the best citizen that I can be. Then, in 2016, Bernie Sanders ran for president. He brought up every issue that we were talking about 30 years ago. 30 years, and for 3 decades, these were the issues that insiders were telling us we shouldn't talk about. They were loser issues, but Bernie Sanders stepped up and moved the conversation. He moved the conversation back to the real issues, the issues of equality, the issues of equal opportunity, and the issues of how to reduce wealth and income disparity. I'm not a politician. I've never run for office, but I'm running for state rep and asking you for your vote today because I don't want my daughters, your kids, our grandchildren to be out there 30 years from now having the same conversation that we're having today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all the candidates for sharing your thoughts on various issues. Let's give them a big round of applause. we would encourage you to continue to learn about each of the candidates. Go to their website, talk to them afterwards. We have this room until 12 o'clock. And they also brought promotional materials in the back tables. And if you decide on a candidate, please help them in their campaign. You know, there are various ways you can help. But if you don't have time or money, the easiest way is to get a yard sign or get a car, the bumper sticker. Yeah. And I also wanted to thank our volunteers for helping putting this together. And I know people putting a lot of time. And thank all the audience members, especially the children and the youth and their parents for coming out here. So the candidates talked about the important date, September 4th. That's a date for the primary election. That's a day right after the Labor Day weekend. So even if you are still in the holiday mode, in the summer mode, do remember that and go to the poll, because this is an important decision that would affect all of us. There's also another day that we need to remember, and that's August 15th. If you are a U.S. citizen and you have not registered to vote, August 15th is the last day for voter registration, so please remember that. And, you know, before we wrap up, we would ask, all of us can gather to take some photos. And feel free to grab some food and grab some promotional materials. Thank you all once again.